Hi class, and welcome to your first video on photosynthesis. Now I know we haven't done videos before, so there might be times that I ask you to pause the video and take some notes or draw a figure. Make sure you're drawing that in your guided notes. You should have been given guided notes for this. So photosynthesis, what is it? What is it all about? Well, photosynthesis is a process that we use the sun's energy in plants to make glucose. Now, I really love photosynthesis. This is because it's a process that allows me to, one, get oxygen. I need oxygen to breathe, as do you. So this is pretty cool. And two, it makes my food to eat. Now, it makes glucose that is then eventually eaten by a primary consumer. I know we talked about this in class. And then it goes up the food chain. So this is the first step in order to make any energy for any organism. Okay class, so we're going to talk about capturing the energy of life. So using photosynthesis and the sun's energy, like I said, this is where we're going to get all energy that we use. It's eventually going to go up the food chain. Remember a couple things. All organisms require energy. So we're going to start out with these producers, and they're going to produce that glucose via photosynthesis. Some organisms that we refer to as autotrophs obtain their energy directly from the sun and store it in organic compounds called glucose in a process called photosynthesis. Now, an autotroph, as you might remember, can also be referred to as a producer. And since we consume these autotrophs, you might have eaten grapes or a banana, those are autotrophs. You're going to be the consumer, or we are also known as heterotrophs. So, you have autotroph, you have producers, you have heterotrophs, and you have consumers. Now we're going to make this compound called glucose. This is a very, very important compound, and you're going to be seeing it a lot on this unit in energy. Glucose, remember, is a carbohydrate. It's a simple form of a carbohydrate, and it's one of our simplest forms that we make. Those bonds in that glucose are where we store our energy, and we're going to release that in what process? See if you can figure it out. That's right. We release that energy in a process called cellular respiration. Now, remember, this is made in photosynthesis. So, this is energy for life's processes. Energy is described as the ability to do work. So anytime we are doing work, we're releasing energy. That's why when you work out, you release energy. So work for a cell includes growth and repair, active transport across cellular membranes, reproduction, synthesis of cellular products. So we're not just limited on the whole organism, but even the cell, to do its cellular processes, needs that energy. So energy is very, very important to us and what we need to survive. So autotrophs, or producers, we got those words again, are going to convert sunlight and carbon dioxide into water and glucose. Two very, very important, and water into glucose. Two very, very important things. So what's happening? Well, we're going to have producers make food for themselves. Heterotrophs, or consumers, don't make food for themselves, so they're going to eat those producers. Okay, a little background on photosynthesis. Obviously, we cannot make our own food. We need to eat other food. So we need to think about these autotrophs who are making their own food. How are they doing it? What are they doing? So only autotrophs are capable of photosynthesis. And this is using the energy from the sun in order to make their glucose that others will eventually eat, and they will use it as well in cellular respiration. Autotrophs still perform cellular respiration to release the energy from glucose they made. So just because they are making their own glucose or their own food doesn't mean they can release it automatically. They still have to go through all those processes in the mitochondria for cellular respiration. Here is a slight simplification. Now, what I want you to realize here is the water at the end can cancel out, and many times does. So we start out with 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. That's that stuff you breathe out. Remember, that's a byproduct of what is happening inside our cells with cellular respiration. Now we use water as well. Now this says we have 12 molecules of water. There's a little debate, but for now, let's go ahead and remember we have 6 molecules of water, and we're just going to cancel out those water molecules at the end. We're going to use light. There is some enzymes that help this happen, but I don't want you to know that. So we're starting out with 6 carbon dioxides, 6 waters, and then we're going to make our glucose. Your glucose being maybe what's in your banana that you ate for breakfast, or the grapes you ate for lunch. That glucose. And then we're also going to have 6 molecules of oxygen. Now, this is the opposite of another equation that you have. What equation is that for? Write that down. Yes, if you said cellular respiration, you would be correct. Good job. Give yourselves a hand. Now, this is a very, very important equation. I want you to copy this down. This whole figure, and I want you to explain to yourself why it has water at the end and why it has water at the beginning and what happens to that water. Now, we all know that plants have differences in their cells. They have that cell wall, that vacuole, and most importantly, they have that chloroplast. This is where photosynthesis occurs. So as you can see right over here, we have a chloroplast. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in that chloroplast. So the chloroplasts have the pigment chlorophyll. This is what directly helps us collect the sun's energy. And that sun's energy is in the form of a photon. So this funny word right here, that is how we collect the sun's energy, and that is a unit of light. Now we're also going to need to collect other things for photosynthesis to occur, like water. Where are we going to get that water? If it is a vascular plant, the roots would be correct. Now non-vascular plants are a little different, but we're going to focus on vascular plants for this presentation. And what about carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide might be a tricky one. Now carbon dioxide comes in through the leaves of plants, and those leaves have small holes in them, and those are called stomata. So they're going to open and close for when the plant needs that carbon dioxide to go through photosynthesis. Now, we have these funny words, granum, thylakoid, and stroma. So let's talk about the actual organelle that this is happening in. This organelle, remember, is the chloroplast. Here's your chloroplast. And the chloroplast is an organelle that has 2 membranes. It has an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And within that inner membrane, we're going to have stacks of what are called thylakoid. Thylakoid is where we're going to find the chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is within these little stacks, and that's going to help us absorb our light. Then we have a stack of that thylakoid, and that's going to be known as a granum. And all around this, it's in this aqueous fluid, water-like fluid, and that is going to be your stroma. So these are pretty important. This is going to be something that occurs within your chloroplast. So this is where photosynthesis is taking place, in the chloroplast. Okay, here is a diagram I would like you to copy to your notes. It's very important, and it's really just a simplification of what is happening. So we have water and carbon dioxide that goes in, and we need the energy of the light. So that carbon dioxide, remember, is coming from the stomata of the leaf. The water is coming from the roots. And do you remember that unit of light I just talked about? Yes, a photon. Good job. Now, we're going to use some chemical reactions, and then we're going to go through and make oxygen, which we breathe in, and carbohydrates, which we need as food. Now, so does the plant, so it's not going to get rid of all of its carbohydrates. Some of its carbohydrates are going to go directly to the cellular respiration. Okay, so this is what actually happens during photosynthesis, and I know this looks overwhelming to start out with, but you start out and you are in the chloroplast, and we have what is called the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. These are two very, very important reactions that occur. Now, the light reactions can be broken up into photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, and we're going to make, as you can see right here, we're making some ATP, and this NADPH, all it is a highly active electron. So we have photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. We also have an electron transport chain, but don't get too confused with that. We're not going to focus on that. So the light comes in, water comes in the light reactions. As you can see, in the light reactions, O2 goes out. We make that ATP and those energized electrons, and they're going to go into the Calvin cycle. And the Calvin cycle is going to have an enzyme. This is called rubisco. And it changes our carbons into our glucose. So this is very, very important. That's all I want you to know. I want you to know that we have rubisco that changes the carbons into the form of glucose. Because if you're starting out with carbon dioxide, as we can see, our carbon dioxide goes into the Calvin cycle. Carbon dioxide only has one carbon per molecule. So we're not going to go through this. We're not going to combine them if we don't have something to help that. And that helping hand is the enzyme rubisco. So we have the Calvin cycle and the light reactions. Light reactions obviously need the light. They're carried out by molecules in the thylakoid membrane, and they convert light energy into chemical energy of ATP and NADPH. Now remember, that NADPH is just an energized electron. Don't get confused with the name. That's all I want you to know. Going to split the water and release oxygen into the atmosphere. So we're bringing in our water, we're splitting the oxygen. And then we're going to go on to the Calvin cycle. This takes place in the stroma, that aqueous fluid. And it uses ATP and the highly activated electron, the NADPH, and converts the CO2 into G3P. G3P is just a shortened form of how we combine those carbons. Not something very important to know for everyone here. And we've used some ATP, and remember, when you use ATP, it makes ADP. So we're going to return that to our thylakoid so that it can be used again when we want it to make more glucose. So we're putting in that water and light into the first photosystems and the light reactions. We're getting out oxygen, and we're making ATP, and we're getting a highly active electron, the NADPH. Then what I want you to know, in the Calvin cycle, which occurs in the stroma, it's coming through and what we're going to do is we're going to bring in that carbon dioxide now, and that carbon dioxide is what's going to be used in order to make that glucose. So I hope you guys all understand photosynthesis now. If you have questions, please email me or Mrs. Hanley. Thanks so much, guys.